This podcast is brought to you by Consildaition Coach, the leading M&A consulting firm in the collision repair industry.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl with another episode of Consildaition Nation, and I have the distinct pleasure today to welcome the Consildaition Coach team live and in person at Babcock's World Headquarters. Laura Gay, the owner of Consildaition Coach, Chad Smith, and Russell Winston, Business Development with Consildaition Coach. Welcome, guys. So glad to have you in the studio.
It is awesome to be here and impressive, I must say.
Thank you very much. So, guys, today, episode 4, we talked about getting into the mind of the buyer. And today we're going to talk about getting into the mind of the seller. What do they look like? How tall are they? What do they have for breakfast? What are their hobbies and interests? We're going to do a deep dive into the mind of the seller. So I wanted to start with you, Laura, and tell me a little bit about the typical seller, the mom and pop shop, the husband-wife team, whoever they might be, whether it's a single shop or a multi-shop organization. What are they like when they're in that mode to sell?
Well, I don't know if they ever totally get in what I would call a mode to sell. I think it starts out by you start thinking about it. And I think back to when I was, in the process of selling. And I remember getting letters upon letters upon letters from consolidators. And I remember just, for lack of better words, a little being overwhelmed by it, a little annoyed by it, because I felt like if my employees saw these letters, they would feel that, I was up to some shady business, right? And then as time went on, I'm a firm believer God gives you what you need when you need it. I was going through some tough times. My former husband was really ill when, we sold the stores. My son's been chronically ill since birth. And it was just one of those things, it just came along at the right time, a true blessing. And I remember the first conversation that I had with a consolidator, I was more nervous than I was on any first date. I mean, it was unnerving because you feel like you're almost cheating on your spouse. And I think of it as like dipping your toe in a cold pool. Like you stick it in there and you like pull it out really quick because you're like, oh my gosh, it scares the tar out of you, just the mere thought of selling your business. So I think that's like the first thing. And then it takes a while for you to get comfortable, kind of like, you step into a pool that's 75 degrees. At first it'll wake you up, but you get used to it after a while. And I think that it's different for everybody. And that was kind of like my experience, like getting into it. How about you, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that there's the typical mind of a seller because of all the clients we deal with, there's several things that you can see that everybody is unique in their own perspective. But within each seller, you can see commonalities that thread throughout the start, all throughout the process. And like you were saying, sometimes you feel like you're doing something wrong because you built this business, but we all knew that this business was built around employees. So sometimes you'll get that feeling of like, okay, am I doing this for me? What's it going to be like for my employees? You kind of, you know that it affects more than just you and your family sometimes. And we always have to remind our clients that you're right, that's the right mentality to have, but never forget, at the end of the day, you own the business. This is your priority, and it has to be what's best for you and your family. And more times than not, using that same mindset, the employees are well taken care of too.
Yeah. What was your experience, Russell?
Very nerve-wracking, just like you said, just kind of sneaking around to catch phone calls because you can't catch phone calls at the shop. You're kind of worried about it, so a lot of jumping in the truck to go for a drive, to go take a phone call, same thing, just real nervous, just a lot of worry and the fear of the unknown, but it's excitement too. I mean, it's the excitement of, okay, they're interested. I've built something that somebody's interested in and you're proud of that. And you're proud that somebody would like to come look at it is the way I saw it,
Yeah.
So.
The fear of the unknown was scary for me too. Yeah. At the time, I felt like, what could I possibly do? I mean, my plan was to be a stay-at-home mom for a while, but at some point I wanted to have another career, and I'm thinking to myself, I was really beat down by the insurance companies. And I think that's what a lot of body shop owners feel, They feel like they're so beat down by the insurance companies. They make you feel like you're nothing but a, shoddy body shop owner, that you don't know anything. And I know that was really hard for me. And I remember, after I sold, so many people came up to me, and just reminded me of who I was, you know what I mean? And I think that was also super scary, was like, what opportunities do exist, for me post-sale, if that's even something that you want to do. I was young. I was 42 when I sold. How old were you?
48.
48. And how about you, Russell?
44.
Yeah, so young.
So,
Well,
yeah.
when you run a shop like that, so many people, you're in the grind every day, and you think that's all you can do, especially if you've only done it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. So you just get in that rut, and so many people don't realize that you have more qualities, you have more things that you can give to other, industries or within the same industry outside of just owning and running a shop.
Yeah.
My fear was, who am I now? I
Oh, yeah.
was in a body shop from the time I was 17 to 44, and then so people come to you for guidance, and you're proud to be able to give that. So after you sell that, who are you? And that's a tough thing to have to reinvent, is what it feels like. But it's a good thing. I've never had anybody that came back that we helped sell come back and say, I want my body shop back. I have not.
That has never happened.
Yeah.
It's funny. I feel like the identity crisis thing is more of a man thing than a woman thing, because I didn't have that at all.
We as humans, we all need, we need purpose in our lives. And the purpose of your life when you run a shop or own multiple shops, whatever, is that entity. So when it goes away, you have that void. And most people worry about how that's going to be filled. You have some shop owners, they want to do it for retirement. They're at that age in their life, that stage in their life, they want to be more family oriented. They've got grandkids, they want to do ball games, unrestricted, worried about running a shop or shops. And you've got some that are, there are some owners that run shops that they're invigorated by it. They get up, they enjoy the challenge of doing or being a part of that industry, fighting the fight if it's so be it. The employees, so forth, and having that camaraderie, they just enjoy it. And you have some that are like, I've been doing this 20 years. I'm tired. I'm ready for a change. But they're not necessarily ready for retirement. Because I know that's one thing I say fought. Whenever we sold it, I was like, well, you're going to retire. I was like, oh, no. No, I'm not retiring at 48. I don't know that I'll ever retire. But you've got to think about what that post-sale life looks like before the closing day.
I think another thing, and we've talked about this, and we always tell our clients, one of the things with selling that always to this day blows my mind is closing day. Like you that's something you talk about a lot, Russell, is just what that looks like. I'll let you take that one.
It really is. You build this thing, and it's kind of like buying a house. You want everybody excited. You want balloons there. If you want to shake somebody's hand that's across the table and say, hey, I'm handing this over to you. And you get that call from the lawyer and says, okay, check your account, the money's in there. And from there, you just walk back to your car and drive off. And there's not the celebration that you want. So that's kind of a tough thing that is hard to battle. You kind of mentally, you have to kind of deal with saying, okay, it's a little more uneventful than you think it would be.
Yeah, very anticlimactic for sure. You definitely feel like there should be passing of the baby, and this is how you take care of the baby, and in a lot of cases that just does not happen, or in most cases
it's impersonal.
It is impersonal.
And that's what the difference is, I think. We all had emotions when we had our shops because of various reasons, but when it comes to selling it, it's at the end of the day, this is a business transaction. There's typically no emotion in it.
Yeah,
you have to keep that
definitely
in mind.
for the buyer.
You guys,
Right. For the seller, yes, there's always going to be emotions. And I think that's where we come in play too, is in what we do is try and help. You need those emotions. You've got to work through them. We've all worked through them, so we can, you can help them with that. But at the end of the day, you've got to be mindful of this needs to be as emotionless as possible for no other reason than to protect your interest in what you've worked so hard for.
You made me think of, I don't know why, the image of dropping your kid off in college and then pulling the car out and then seeing them disappear in the rearview mirror, and I never owned a business, so I've never had that emotional attachment. And I think non-business owners like me go, yeah, sell, take the money, but we don't think about this blood, sweat, and tears you've invested in all those years, and we would if we did own a business. But I wanted to go back to something you said, Laura. When you're running your shops, you were getting bombarded with letters to sell. And that was sort of your instigator. You never even thought about it before, from what you said. And that was your impetus to start thinking about it. And then there were other life circumstances that you started thinking about. What typically coaxes a buyer into a seller into thinking about selling. And I'm sure it's different for everybody. But and I'm sure obviously right now with Consolidation Nation podcast, with your articles you write for us, everybody in the industry knows that their shop could potentially be sold, and if they're in the market. But so what typically gets a seller thinking about that?
I think it starts with they start getting letters or contact from buyers or somebody in the industry, showing interest. And like anybody, that's going to make you feel good, that people are interested, I think that's the first thing gets you thinking. And then I think, I think it's safe to say that 90% of all shop owners are stressed to the max. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
95.
95%. I was being conservative. They're all frustrated. Most are really suffering and challenged with having really good profit margins now. I mean, you really have to reinvent yourself and change the way you ran your business from 10 years ago. That was one thing when Chad was selling, he and I talked about, what was going to be involved for him to continue to grow and whatnot post-sale. And I remember Chad telling me, I think I'm going to have to spend X amount of dollars in retooling, education, certifications, and things to be competitive. And this is how many years ago now?
A little over 3.
Yeah, almost 4 years. And I mean, he's absolutely spot on, because that's exactly what it's going to take to be competitive. And I think that's probably, some of the biggest things that drive it, but I'll pass it on to you guys for additional comment.
It depends on who the seller is. Of course, you have the standard. Everybody thinks, well, I'm ready to retire. That's my motivation to sell. And again, that's a big portion of what we deal with. But a lot of it is burnout. They're just tired. They're just ready to move on to something different. I mean, we've seen sellers. I think we have some that was in their late 30s, early 40s. But they're just at that point that they know the time is right, of course, because what we've seen the past 4 or 5 years with consolidation is it continues to grow and expand. But you've got those that are just want to take advantage of it. They know that, there could be that time 10, 15 years from now, they don't have that opportunity perhaps to sell to a larger organization. So they don't want to risk it per se. There are very few out there that are just very mindful business people. They see the opportunity. They can sell now, and then they can pivot, if you will, into another career outside of the collision industry in another business altogether. So it really depends on, who they are and what their motivation is. I mean,
I would say that's the two. I mean, you've got the people that are ready to retire, and you've got the people that are not ready to retire, but they see that it's a good business decision to go ahead and sell now.
One more thing I just kind of thought of. I think also when shop owners that actually own their real estate, when they realize that they can make more money in retirement on renting their building back to their buyer, they're like, give it to me, I'm out, peace.
Mailbox money.
Yeah,
I love that term that you used.
Yeah, mailbox money. I think that's when they realize that, they're like, gosh, I'm working so hard for this and I could have that, sign me up.
Well, they finally realized they've actually had 2 businesses all along. They maybe didn't click that way. One, the operational side of it, run the body shop and so forth. And if they're fortunate enough to own their own property and have organized it correctly, it's a separate business altogether that has its own life, that can still exist post-sale.
Yeah, and then you live on that rental income. I mean, we've got one client right now that's getting $60,000 a month in rental income. Can you imagine?
No. No, never in my life, no.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that no matter what kind of seller you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what demographic, you kind of have to make a decision right now. There's a famous phrase of the road is paved with flat squirrels who could not make a decision. Right?
Yes.
That's a new one. But I mean, it's accurate.
Yeah, right. So this is a time in the history of the collision repair industry that is the best time to sell. We talk about that all the time. And every year we're speculating, how long is this going to last? How long is this going to last? And we still see a long, long runway, right? So they have to be decisive right now. But I feel like we're at a crossroads. You're either ready to sell, or there's a lot of very aggressive, young or not young, body shop owners who see opportunity and they want nothing to do with selling. They're excited by electric vehicles. They're excited by ADAS calibration. And every shop that closes, they see more dollar signs. You know, I was talking to a shop in Erie, PA, and his shop was crammed with cars inside and out. And I said, what's going on? You know, he goes, well, a lot of shops in my area have closed. I'm one of the only guys left. So there's opportunity.
Absolutely.
There is.
So we're at a crossroads.
Yeah, 100%. And in no way are we suggesting, you know, you should sell your
No,
shop. We're
no.
suggesting, hey, if it's something you're thinking about, do that. But like the 34 years that I've been in the collision space, I think about how the collision business has evolved. And I am 100% sure that we are in a space right now that is like the dragon's tail is finally whipping. We've got a lot of new models. You know how people are running shops. One of the biggest ones that we hear a lot of people talking about is, you know, a balanced bill model. You know, for people that aren't aware of that, it's basically where the insurance company, you know, let's say pays $4,000 to fix a car. The actual way to repair the car properly is $5,000. The customer pays the difference, and the shop ultimately is fixing the car 100% accurately to OEM specifications. And that model is a lot more profitable because you're actually not running around chasing your tail. Just like when you go to a doctor today, you go to the doctor, you wait 30 minutes to see the doctor, you see him for 10 minutes and you're out. You know, it's almost like, you know, you really have to, that's why the concierge doctor model has been created. It's the same mentality because that's the only way doctors have figured out how to be profitable, and same with collision shop owners. And I think if you're following this model and you're fixing cars properly and you're delivering a really high quality repair and high customer service experience, I think that's, you know, going to be the home run, you know, moving forward, you know, at least for the next 5 to 10 years and frankly beyond. What do you guys think?
I think that there's room for the shop owner. That's not going anywhere.
I
think
agree.
that you can still, if you love it, if you want to do it, there's room for that. A lot of the MSOs cannot compete with the local guy that's been there, that's, you know, knows everybody in town, and so there's always going to be a place for that. And if you love it, we're never an advocate for sell for if you are loving it. We want the people that are ready to, you know, we want to help the people that need help. And that's what I see.
Yeah, that's the whole reason, you know, that when I started Consolidation Coach, it was to help people not get the short end of the stick. They're just like, you know, anybody that's selling is just like myself, Chad, Russell. We all own shops. We all had to wash cars on Friday when the porter didn't come to work.
Yeah.
We had to scuff bumpers, you know, on a Friday or a Thursday rather, when, you know,
Monday, Tuesday.
Oh yeah, any day of the week when the painter's helper didn't come in, you know. So we've all, you know, we've worn all the different hats, so we know what it's like. We know the pain.
Right. Well, and you've mentioned it before. I mean, you've only got one opportunity to sell your business the correct way.
Yeah.
You know, and most of the people we deal with are not multiple business owners, or they, you know, built a business, sell it, and then do something. They're pretty much generationally tied to the body shop or what have you, and this is their one opportunity to sell it. So you want to make sure you do it right.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not like buying a car. You buy a car, you sell a car. You buy or homes.
Yeah.
Typically, I would say 90% of the people that we deal with, you know, this is their one-time business transaction they'll ever probably be involved with.
Yeah.
So
and it's so important because you've built this business. So many people don't realize what their business is worth, and they're in fact creating generational wealth, you know what I mean, that they can pass on, especially if they're retaining their real estate and renting it back. You know, it's just, it's such an opportunity that, you know, I don't think a lot of people that are actually selling their shops really realize like what they're doing, you know what I mean, and how monumental it is.
Laura, you mentioned earlier repairing the car right, and the last episode of Consolidation Nation, we touched on OE certifications, and you said it wasn't necessarily a deal breaker if a shop didn't have those, but if you do, great. And I know the industry is still they're hearing a lot about this. OEM certification is a trend, but they're sort of on the fence if they don't have one of those because of the investment. And they don't feel like, they feel like if they're going to spend the money, they want the cars to show for it, and they don't think they're going to get that necessarily. But for other shops, it's not about the volume. It's about repairing the car right and educating the consumer. And that's another thing. A lot of shops believe that consumers don't know an OE certified shop from a non-OE certified shop. But talk to me a little bit about OE certifications and repairing the car right and where that stands and how that might elevate your status as a shop to the mind of a buyer.
you know, we've talked about on other episodes that, you know, just like you've got different restaurants that you can go to, you know, think of Consolidators as the same thing, you know. Some are really focused on having OEM certifications, and some are very focused on having iCar. Some are focused on both. You know, they all just have a different, you know, personality like we've talked about before. And I think with the OEM certifications, I think that's something that if you're, you know, looking to sell, you know, it's important, but not that important. But if you're looking to stay in it to win it, I think it's important to think about what your niche is going to be. I live in Naples, Florida, and there's a guy there that has a shop, and he's got, I think, 3 major OEM certifications, and they're the Highline ones that you have to earn. And that's his niche, right? And his shop is jam-packed. And there's those type of models, you know, all over the place. There's a guy in New Jersey that's a big Subaru shop, same thing, like that's his niche. I think you just have to figure out what your niche is, and it really drives off of the area that you're in, and you know what it is that those people want or need, you know, and figure out what that is and deliver that niche. I mean, think about it. Consolidation Coach. I mean, we are a consulting firm that specializes in helping body shops sell, and that's all we do. Like, if that doesn't get niche, you know, I mean, I think that just resonates on what, you know, if you want to be competitive and you want to stay in business and in it to win it, like I say, as a collision shop owner, you need to figure out what that niche is and really drive down to that.
Yeah. I think so many people still look at OE certifications, and you alluded to this, as a revenue stream, that you can get these whatever type certifications they may be, and you're going to see a revenue impact from it. And more times than not, you're going to be disappointed, because it's not. But it goes back to what you were saying, is learning to make sure you're repairing the cars correctly. And I think what you touched on is a very important aspect of it, is the niche portion of it. Because a lot of people, going back to that revenue stream, they're thinking, well, if I get 10 certifications, my sales are going to go up by X. You've got to be more mindful when you start looking at these certifications. Look at your sales mix. Are you working on more Nissan, Hondas? Are you working more Lexus, Toyota, GM, whatever? And kind of correlate your OE certifications to what your sales mix is, to focus really on what your market priority is. And it could lead to more sales, but if you do it from an aspect of preparing for sale or trying to drive more revenue to your facility, you're going to be disappointed. And I think the majority of body shops know that now, but I think that was something we seen early on as OE certification started to build. But especially alluding back to what your original question was, when you're looking at selling, I don't know that we've ever really talked to any of our clients that are thinking about selling and encourage them to get certifications to sell.
I agree.
You know, it's not going to bring that much value to you as a business if you do not already have those certifications. Now, Gold Class it's borderline must for most of the larger consolidators, because if you don't have that Gold Class certifications, when they come in after they take over, they have to convert that shop into a Gold Class shop more times than not, because that goes into their DRP relationships. That might go into some of the certifications they see the benefit of having as a result of the prior ownership not having. I think one of the certifications we had when we sold months after, they didn't renew it. They let it fall off because they just didn't see the value in it. You know?
But I'll add to that too, if you don't have the iCar, that I haven't seen that bust a lot of deals, but what I do see is they may say, well, we may need the additional money that it'll take to get iCar certified. So I wouldn't think of that as a hurdle that can't be crossed. I just think it's something to know that you need to have, and if you don't have it, you're going to pay for that side of it, you know, on the sell or either while you're in business. So
yeah, I
think it's something that's a very good thing to have either way, but at the same time, it's not a hurdle that can't be crossed if you're trying to sell.
No, it can't be crossed. Another thing, I think it says something too about the establishment or the culture of that business. If they're not iCar Gold Class, from the buyer's perspective, they have to question, okay, what does the quality of work look like? How are they training their employees if they're not iCar Gold Class? Whatever your opinion is of iCar, that's beside the point. Yeah. You know, what does the culture of that shop look like?
And a lot of checking on cars that, you know, a lot of coming in and making sure that, like you said, being repaired correctly. And that's what it's all about. That's what we're here for as shop owners anyway.
I'm glad you guys brought that up, because I think sometimes people think of Consolidation Coach and you guys just help a shop sell, but you actually coach. And if there's a shop that has made the decision to sell, but they've they're not sure if their shop is in the optimum position in the eyes of a buyer, you guys can get them from point A to point B, right? If they are, maybe there's some just red flags that you see, and you get them prepared for the sale. That's part of what you guys do, right?
100%. It goes from sometimes we get financials and we're like, we know that they're not ever going to be able to get through financial due diligence with their financials. Either they're not detailed enough, or maybe, I mean, there's a myriad of scenarios that play out, but that's, often, a case. And sometimes, we'll go to the shop and when we'll visit the shop, we don't always have to do that, but sometimes we do, we'll see things that need to be changed or just different scenarios. Thoughts?
Yeah, without a doubt. We're going to be very upfront with our clients. We don't want to paint a rosy picture just for the sake of gaining a client. We'd much rather be brutally honest and let them know up front, this is the hurdles that you're going to have. And a lot of times it's still hurdles that you can overcome. It might be, let's put a game plan together for you for the next 12, 18 months, start achieving some certain things, and then at that point, then you're potentially ready to go to market. And then we have some clients that are in markets that are just, for lack of a better word, they're impenetrable. There's no consolidators within 4 hours.
Yeah.
And you just have to be brutally honest and say, the time is not right for you yet.
Yeah.
And touching on that, that's the same thing you said about the 12 to 18 months. Sometimes it takes a little time for it to grow to them.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because so that's, same thing, and we give that same, answer to them. So, hey, it's probably not right now. It's going to take a little time to do it. So,
Yeah.
That's something that, we do have to have sometimes.
Yeah.
So Laura, you were a seller before, and I think you said to me one time you somewhat regretted selling when you did, given the market now, that
Oh, yeah.
right, you could have made so much more money. So how can a seller today avoid that scenario, avoid those regrets, and truly max out when they sell?
Jason, for the record, let me just say, I don't regret selling the stores for 1 second. I do regret not getting as much money, as I could have gotten in today's market. But I feel like the return on investment, being able to, travel, created this business, getting to meet shop owners, help shop owners, down the journey, becoming friends with, Chad through his sale, and then Russell, and, them coming aboard, our little team. And, this is a job for us, but it's not a job.
Right.
We have a lot of fun, like coming here today, to Babcock's. I mean, it is an unbelievable experience. Like, we would never have gotten this experience if we weren't doing what we were doing, likely. And getting to tour this facility is just, I mean, it's unbelievable. So I feel like, I know that you only get so many tickets to the Fair of Life, and, at some point you run out of tickets. So I just feel like, for me, I've gotten to do so many fun things and experiences that if I had been stuck in my hole, my pit, my shops, I would have not been able to. So I'm very grateful that I exited when I did. But again, it's a personal thing, and you have to do what's best for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what you actually asked, I think, was how's the best way for shop owners to maximize that return? In hindsight, it's always 20/20. Looking back, we could have, you can always do different things or have a bigger operation perhaps that will bring you more value. But you are who you are at that time you're ready to sell. The biggest thing I think we see more often than not is people don't have their financial house in order. If not anything, because you run your shop the way you run your shop, you have certifications, gold class, equipment. I mean, we never say, hey, you need to invest $250,000 in your facility before you go to market. Just, you are who you are. But how are you representing who you are through your financials? And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people can brush up on their P&Ls, primarily make sure they're organized a certain way. And they are actually tracking those to, see what opportunities might be there for their own revenue, that they're missing something, that they could do something very simple and make a 10% increase in their revenue, and they don't even realize it because they're not looking at their financials.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, that, basically no cost, that could show big returns, if and when they do decide to go to market.
Yeah. We've got a client that has spent the last 3 years cleaning up his books and cleaning up, just running a very, not that his shop wasn't nice and clean before, it really was, but he's really like cleaned up his accounting act, for lack of better words, and it is impressive, you know. And I think now that he's done that, he's so proud of what he's done. I think he's really struggling whether he wants to sell or not, which is awesome, you know.
Well, sometimes when you do that practice, let's be honest, a lot of shops do not know if they're actually profitable or not. They don't realize their P&L. We have X sales, and that's all they realize. They don't know about their gross profit, their net income, what their overhead looks like. So if they actually go through that exercise, they may actually realize, this is not as bad as I thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't get me wrong, we have not really seen that, I think,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking out loud, I think you need to do that to really realize what your house looks like from a financial standpoint.
Yeah. Thinking about this particular client, I think that's exactly the case for him, you know.
That's interesting that you get all your ducks in a row and figure out, clean up your accounting, and then all of a sudden you say, I don't want to sell, because you see a profit-making machine, and maybe things get a little easier because they instill SOPs or
Right.
something.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, what are you selling? You're selling a financial instrument for return.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you don't understand that and know what your return is internally before, which that's kind of why we do evaluation and so forth, to kind of bring that home to them so they can see really what are they generating.
Right.
Well, thank you all for being here, present at Babcock's World Headquarters. This has been an awesome discussion of the mind of the seller. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about post-sale life. That life doesn't have to end when you sell your body shop. We're going to talk about real-world examples of what people have done after selling their shop and what the options are out there, right? So,
Yep.
looking forward to it.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Jason.